Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibilityman. We are committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Dr. Seema Patel. She's board certified in family and functional medicine. She's formerly a senior physician at the prestigious Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. She was on the front line during the height of the COVID practice, and more recently, she has opened up a new practice with a focus on functional medicine. Dr. Patel, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. I have a lot of questions to ask you. I'm looking forward to our conversation. But first, a programming note to our viewers and our listeners. Your support matters. Follow us, like us, share our podcast wherever you listen to this broadcast. Also, our sponsor information is below the description of this program. Well, Dr. Patel, I got to ask you, looking back when you were a youngster, what made you think about medicine as a possible career?
So actually, I don't have a glorious answer for that. I grew up in a very traditional Indian family household, and my parents told me I had like three options. I had medicine, I had business, and engineering. And I'm like, oh my God, engineering and business? I never want to do those. And my father said, his best piece of advice, one of his best pieces of advice, that he said, as a woman, if you have economic independence, you stay in a relationship because you actually love this person. You choose to be with this person. So medicine will give you this. Yeah. So that's why I went into medicine, to be totally honest. But I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to go into medicine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you're right. There's usually push factors and pull factors when people look at careers, push and pulls. You had your initial impetus from what you've just said was a push factor, but I'm curious. When did medicine, would you say, get into you? When was it no longer something that was a great idea, but it was something that you really felt passionate about?
Actually, I would have to say I loved second year of medical school, learning about all the diseases and then getting into actually meeting patients in the third and fourth year. Clearly, residency is a very hard time for everybody. But I was in Chicago, so as a young person, being in Chicago, it was like wonderful. I had fun. It was hard work, but it was like very fun because everybody else was doing it. And one of my residents told me, like, maybe you think it's fun now because you're older and you don't remember how bad it was. And that's a possibility. But I reflect back and I have very fond memories.
That's fantastic. So where did you do your residency?
I was in Chicago at the University of Illinois.
Okay, that's great. And you did your medical training in that same area? Was it Michigan or?
No, I went to
Ohio
Michigan
State.
undergrad, and then I crossed state boundaries over to Ohio State. So
that's right. We are both Buckeyes. Yeah.
Okay. Actually more of a Wolverine than a Buckeye, but yeah.
Very good. So let's see now. You were at the Cleveland Clinic, and you were in functional medicine. What was that experience like for you?
So, the Cleveland Clinic is one of the few places that actually has a center for functional medicine. And so functional medicine is different than integrative medicine because a lot of people are like, isn't that the same thing? Or what is it? So the first thing I want people to understand is like, what is functional medicine? What I would say it's sort of an evolution of a physician. So you start off, kind of as a generalist and you learn, magnesium helps you poop, it helps you sleep. Melatonin helps you sleep, but you don't really understand the why. You just kind of know it works. No. And then you kind of go into integrative medicine, which is sort of what I did. You learn a lot about nutrition and stress management and alternative therapies and mind, body, spirit. And it's really great. But you still can't take care of sick people very, very well. And you're kind of like, God, what am I missing? And what functional medicine does, it gives you this foundation of a systems-based biology approach saying, how does the body work together? And every physiological, biochemical, genetic pathway that can go wrong. So it gives you this deep understanding of how this body functions and possibly all of the dysfunctions that are occurring and how you can balance them. Yeah. So it was profound. So that's what I started there, and the patients that we would see at the Cleveland Clinic are by far, I have never seen sick patients like this before. There's ratings that we do in healthcare, seeing how sick people are. They're called PROMIS Global Mental and Physical Health Scores. And an average person should be around 50. I mean, I routinely saw people at 5 to 35, which is very, very low functioning. So clearly they had a huge need for our services. I don't think most people understand, like, we saw extremely ill patients. I did see some very healthy people who are like, I'm just here for optimizing my health. And it was so nice to see them, because you're like, oh, I got this,
Yeah, that's important to understand. As you look at this field, functional medicine, you said that it's a good opportunity for a physician to work with. You're trying to help sick people heal. Is that about right? All right. But when you look at the other branch of medicine, so integrative medicine, you're really trying to find a way to help healthy people stay healthy. Is that?
I think my integrative medicine friends would probably disagree with that. I think they also feel like they're helping and healing patients, but there's a limit. I just sort of feel like the sicker the person is, and this is exactly what we did at Cleveland Clinic. When we worked on post-COVID patients, we saw more moderate to severe patients because they were going to be better served with our systems-based approach and our multidisciplinary team of health coaches and dietitians and counselors than just, alternative integrated approaches and with just some general information. It's like a Venn diagram, and how we use diet is very therapeutic, and each system has very specific things it needs for it to work. And so we hone in on it. Like, do you need this? Does this person not need this? And so when we're picking supplements, we're really trying to say, this is what's broken, and this is how I'm going to try to address it.
Right. I got you. Okay. So integrative medicine and let's say lifestyle medicine, are they in the same family?
And once again, it's like a Venn diagram. All of us share the core lifestyle part of, good nutrition, sleep, stress management, movement. But I think what separates out functional medicine is that diet becomes very therapeutic. It becomes very systems-based. And I think integrative medicine also reaches into different mind-body therapies, whereas lifestyle is really about honing in just on lifestyle. So it's not that one is better than another. It's really, where is the patient at and what would best serve them? And I think it's very important for the physician or the provider to understand what they can and cannot achieve.
Well, there's a new trend, and it's new to me. I'm not a medical person, but a lot of people are talking about food as medicine. In fact, people have been writing books about that. What's your take on that? This whole notion of food, I guess food is medicine because you can use the foods to make medicine, but what's your take on that subject?
Oh, this is a core principle of functional medicine. Food, we make more decisions about what we eat every day than any other decision. And what we nourish our body, not feed our body, nourish our bodies, can change gut microbiome, which is all the healthy bacteria in your gut. It helps you make different hormones. I mean, it's all related. And, we evolved over time, Stephen. I mean, we didn't evolve eating processed food at all. We evolved from eating things grown in the wild with a soil microbiome that was alive, communicating with the plants that we ate, communicating with the animals that we ate. But as we industrialize farming, all of these relationships are changing. And so the quality and the quantity and the kinds of foods that we're getting are really not as nourishing. Even if you're trying to be healthy, they're just not as nourishing as they used to be, even 70 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh, I remember growing up, in South Carolina, a lot of families grew their own vegetables. I mean, their own corn and that kind of thing. But then in the 1970s, I distinctly remember many of those small farmers went away and big agro farmers began to emerge. And that, you're saying, changed what we began to consume in many ways.
And it's also government subsidies. What did
Yeah.
government fund? It funded corn and potatoes and soybeans. So these things are very cheap and oftentimes are used in fast food restaurants
Yeah.
and fast food, processed food, because it's cheap. And so we can bring the price of food down. It's more complicated than just you got to eat nutrition. There's a whole policy debate that goes around all of that
Right.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There are two parts of this coin: personal responsibility and, of course, the responsibility of government, for sure. So let me ask you, if you were called before the Congress, it's just a hypothetical question, and they ask you, Dr. Patel, what would you say is the status of healthcare in the USA today? And it's 2022. What kinds of things would you say to them?
So, it's multiple parts of this question. Healthcare in and of itself in the United States is disease focused and not preventative or wellness focused at all. And so when we think about what is actually really important in life is when we are focusing on preventing and keeping people healthier.
Right.
By the time somebody actually has a known disease diagnosis, the amount of changes we can make, it's a continuous spectrum of disease, of health. By the time you get to disease, you're at the tail end of it. And when we needed to make that intervention is much earlier. So one of the things I would say is we really need to be focused far earlier in just keeping people healthy. We spend most of our money at the end of life, the last 10 years of life, where we're not going to make any difference, really, very low. But if we spent all of that beforehand, these people wouldn't be at the end of life in the situation of nursing home care and long-term care, which is really a very, very bad place. And it's also discontinuous. So if you go to one hospital, it doesn't always talk to the next hospital. So you may have had an amazing workup someplace, but it's not getting translated. And if you, the patient, is not able to say this, or we're not able to get the records, then that care is very fractured.
Right.
Yeah, and I also think there's a huge primary care shortage. I mean, this has been talked about for a long time. But what I didn't understand, I just went to a public health conference where they said 55%, no, a third of all physicians that are generalists that are, in primary care are over 55 years of age and planning on retiring in the next 5 years. And there's nothing coming up in the pipeline.
Wow.
To replace the wisdom of 20, 25 years of experience next to somebody who has 3. I mean, that's not sane.
Right, right.
I mean, I can tell you right now, I'm in my 50s, and what I've told people in my 30s, I came with all the right intentions, but I just didn't have life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I can tell people now, after having life experience, watching patients over decades of work, is very different. And it's gonna be it's scary. When I saw those numbers, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's something for us to be aware of. But I want to unpack something that you just said, is that we have mainly a disease, we call it healthcare, which is mainly a disease care system. Now, it seems to me that there's a very powerful lobby that makes it difficult for the healthcare system to merely be healthcare. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Let me tell you what I'm thinking of. If I watch television on any one day, I may see 3 or 4 commercials from a pharmaceutical company touting a drug to help manage a disease. So it seems as if we're being acculturated to think disease care is the way to go. Just get a pill.
Yeah, I mean, no, the messages are everywhere that, take a pill, it will solve your problems. Take this medication, it will solve your problems. We're trying to make things like little bullet points, but health is much more encompassing. Health is, it's a way of life. I mean, that's what I tell my patients. I'm like, you have to live this way. This isn't just for 2 or 3 months. What I recommend, and we're all going to have ups and downs, but think of health wherever you are as a baseline. And when you, start to make changes in health, whether it's nutrition and lifestyle and supplements or whatever else that you add, you're changing that baseline. But health itself is not a linear progression upward. It's going to have its ups and downs because that's life. We're going to have some stressful event happen. We're going to get COVID and maybe post-COVID. We weren't expecting, we're going to have a baby. I mean, these are just life experiences. But what we hope is that the baseline of where people are is high. And most people in the United States are actually quite low. For a developed country, we have some of the worst health statistics in infant mortality, disease conditions, longevity. I'm like, we are one of the richest countries in the world with one of the best healthcare systems, but the worst outcomes.
Right.
I just don't think that's right.
Yeah, that's incredible, because I went to the Center for Disease Control website, the CDC, and I was curious about some of these chronic conditions, and they listed them off, and you know them very well. And then they said that there's certain populations that have a higher percentage of these chronic conditions. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, why is that? Why is that? Why do we have all of these chronic conditions in one of the richest countries in the world? And why does it impact certain cultural groups more than others?
So, this is in medicine what we call the social determinants of care. In public health, how people access healthcare is it's called the 4 A's. Is it acceptable? Is it available? Is it accessible? And is it affordable? So oftentimes what will happen when we're talking about social determinants of care, it's not always accessible or affordable or acceptable. And part of social determinants of care is when we look at, people of color groups, whether it's African Americans, it's Latinos, it's Asian immigrants, Native Americans, oftentimes there's barriers there. And it's not the race. I mean, it's racism that's the barrier, right? My husband has been doing a lot of work and reading, so I see all these books coming in about how it's been situated for so many years of how we mistreat people or how we think about people. It's much more complicated. And it's not that I don't think providers ever go out thinking about any of this, but sometimes we don't understand when we make a recommendation, like, hey, I think you should be doing this. We don't think like, oh my God, they don't have a car. Oh my God, they can't pay the copay. Oh my God, they can't go to the drugstore. We haven't thought about all of those because that's outside of the realm of what we're supposed to do. But in order to deliver really good care, all of that has to be connected. Yeah. And if it's not connected, people go underserved.
Yeah, this is just a complicated subject. I mean, we have Medicare in this country, in the USA, and may I share this true story with you? It involved myself. I was curious to know whether Medicare offers dental insurance. So I called up Medicare. I'm thinking, I don't want to talk to a salesman with any insurance company. I want to talk to Medicare. So I called up Medicare and I spoke with an agent who said, yeah, you can get dental insurance. And she gave me a plan. And I thought, well, if I can get dental insurance with zero deductible, I should be able to get vision. So I called back and they said, wait a minute, you didn't get what you thought you got. They said they cancel out your traditional Medicare and put you in an Advantage plan, which is going to increase your monthly, your out-of-pocket copays. I'm thinking, what? And I called twice and two people told me that. So what I'm saying here is that this seems to be just a difficult medical culture to navigate, even for someone who has an education.
Oh, it's very difficult. And it's extremely difficult. I can tell you, my patients would come in thinking everything was going to get covered. Then they get a letter saying this, and this is not covered. It's considered experimental. And now they're like stuck with this huge bill. And they're like, I really don't want to pay it. I can't even afford it. And what are you going to do? I mean, like, it shouldn't, I don't know why it's this complicated. I really don't.
Right. Okay. Well, we aren't going to solve that problem today, but we agree that it's complicated. So let me ask you this. So if you see a patient for the first time, and the patient presents with a condition, in your mind, do you think pharmacology first, or you think something else first?
No, I never think pharmacology. I'm not a big pharma person at all. So, how functional medicine, when we see patients at your first visit, we create a timeline to understand what have been all of your exposures, your stressors, your antibiotic use, medication use, your surgeries, your injuries, because we want to understand how many hits you've taken and how many other dysfunctions that could be happening. Because people will come in with something really vague, like, I'm fatigued. Well, there could be 2,000 reasons why you're fatigued. But when you put the timeline together, they're like, oh, look at this. They were a premature baby. They were never breastfed. They had a lot of infections, tons of antibiotics. They had mono and never felt well afterwards. They've been working in, pesticides and insecticides because they're doing gardening. So you're like, okay, now the fatigue can be multiple things. It could be toxins. It could be mono. It could be like you're lacking specific nutrients to help you detoxify. It could be some genetic defect on how you actually can detoxify. So now it looks very different because the timeline has been spelled out and we're seeing much more of why someone's fatigued. And it could be stressors. I mean, they could be in an abusive family. They could have a special needs child, not sleeping, who knows? But all of that's going to come out in that timeline. In that 15-minute appointment at primary care, since they don't do the timeline, it's whatever you can spill out as a patient. And if you can't get all this right information down as a doctor, you're like, oh, well, your thyroid looks okay and your B12 looks okay. Just get some more rest. Like that's ineffective.
Yeah, I see. So what you're saying is that it's important for a doctor to look at the whole person,
right,
not just the symptom that the person is experiencing. Now, what about the role of the patient? What are we supposed to do when we go see a physician?
Well, it depends on who you're seeing, right? So if you're seeing primary care, it's a little bit harder, I think, being able to, like, I coach my kids. I'm like, because they're teenagers, I really want them to be able to explain the story well. So I'm always like, tell me about so you want to talk about when it started, how does it hurt? Does it go anywhere else? Are there any other, symptoms that you're having? Like, what did you do that helped? What did you do that didn't help? Just so they can learn how to tell the story back. But in functional medicine, we get an hour with the patient the first time. And they have to complete the timeline beforehand. So we're going deep inside that timeline to really look at adverse events because, adverse events scar us. All of us, as we get older, are going to have some stressful event that has happened. But what have we done with this stress? What have we done with the trauma that happened? Most of us just ignore it. We're just like, we'll just keep working hard and just it didn't happen, right? That's not how the body works. I mean, if you look at dementia, one of the other underlying causes is stress, frontal lobe atrophy causing from stress. I'm like, it's 1 in 2 people. And most of my patients have never dealt with their stress. They're like, I'm all right.
Yeah, but what you're saying is so important, because as a patient, we don't understand. Some of us do not understand that stress, and you've mentioned sleep, all of these things impact a person's health. And we think that it's always something that a pill can just fix. And a pill can't always fix, your stress, for sure, a past trauma, something like that. So
yeah, it's the foundations, what you eat every day, how well you're sleeping, how deeply you're sleeping, your movement. You don't have to necessarily always exercise because not everybody can exercise, but movement. Having, healthy, loving relationships with people, that's so helpful when we have people that love us and we feel loved, because part of all this stressful events for a lot of people is because they feel not valued, not respected, not loved. And then I think sleep. Right. So those are foundations and they need to be secure in our entire life. Sure, we're going to have some times where it's not going to be good, but it just can't be, I'm going to forever live on 4 hours of sleep. You can't do that. Something will happen.
Okay. So you said a lot there and I want to just kind of break this down. So I want to explore, I'm going to call this, the question is how to be healthy, because you mentioned a few things there, including, I'll put this title on it, mindfulness. But let's first start with proper nutrition? How can we be healthy, and how can nutrition help us with that?
So functional medicine, what we really want you to understand is, we want you to get the full phytonutrient variety. So phytonutrients are all the colors that come in plants and fruits and vegetables. And so we want you to hit the rainbow. So we want you to make sure every day you're having something that's orange and red and yellow and blue or purple, white or tan, green. Just don't eat just green vegetables. We want all of them because nature has evolved with all these phytonutrients and they all provide us something really beneficial. And so the more variety that we have is really important. And so for kids, I recommend at least 5 servings, mostly vegetables, not fruit, because Americans are really good about eating fruit, but we suck at eating vegetables. Right. So it's usually three veggies and 2 fruits for my kids. And for adults, I'm really pushing them, if they're small, about 7 servings, and a serving size is like a half a cup. So if you just kind of cup your hand like this, that should be about a half a cup. And then for bigger people, because I have like people who are 6, 7, I'm like, you need closer to 12 because you're so big. I'm a little person, so I aim for less. So between 7 to 12 servings. And once again, mostly vegetables. About, as we get older, I really try to say, maybe 2 fruits, but mostly vegetables. People are like, oh my God, there's no way. But look at the serving size. It's not that big, right? You're thinking a massive salad as 1 serving. I'm like, no, massive salad is probably like 4 or 5 servings, right?
Yeah. So what you're telling us is that eat smaller portions, but several times during the day, like no grazing, as opposed to doing it all at once? Or?
Well, no, not necessarily. It depends on the person. So I always check a level called insulin. It's the hormone that puts away the food that we eat and how it's broken down into sugar. So it depends. People who have very low insulin levels, these people are like very fit. And I actually like them to do intermittent fasting or go a longer time without eating because they can tolerate that. Most of America cannot tolerate that because they have metabolic syndrome because they're overweight and their insulin level is high. So if they go too long without eating, they get hangry. They get hungry because insulin's put everything away. Now they're like so hungry because it's high and it shouldn't be high. It should be low. So it depends on where this person is in health. The more unhealthy the person is, I want to clean up their diet, stop eating 3 hours before bedtime. Because if you eat before bedtime, your insulin will stay high. You're going to become a borderline diabetic or a diabetic eventually. So the first thing, no eating 3 hours before bedtime. So you can drop that insulin level down. And for those people who have high insulin levels, you won't know until you check. You can kind of tell just if somebody has a lot of central weight, like right in that midsection, that's high insulin. People are like, oh, really? That apple shape? That's usually high insulin. And we confirm it, but those people, I much prefer, good protein, good fats, and vegetables, but very few, less grains because the grain is really pushing that insulin level high. They don't need it. I'm trying to prevent something. So do they have to be grain-free? No, I just think they need substantially less than whatever they're getting.
Okay. Now you mentioned good protein. What are good protein?
So I kind of classified proteins into plant proteins and animal proteins. So plant proteins, the best sources, as long as you don't have any food allergies or food sensitivities, soy, non-genetically modified soy, organic would be best because soy is really one of these toxic things that we make. But beans and lentils, nuts, really great sources of protein. And they have been used for thousands of years in people all around the world because it's a lot cheaper than meat protein. And then I usually tell people, then we want to go into the seafood category, as long as we don't have any allergies. That tends to be a much richer form of nutrition and healthier form. And then, your 2-legged animals, your chicken, your turkey, your quail, whatever people eat, and then 4-legged animals, because they tend to have the greatest risk of other problems. I mean, getting clean meat is very expensive. So it's not that I'm anti 4-legged animals. I think I'm not a paleo person. I'm not a vegan person. I think if most of us can be at least 70% vegan-like, and the last 30%, because a third of your meal should be probably protein-based. So that kind of helps people structure things, because what I usually see is people are like 50% meat, like 10% vegetable, and then the rest of it's grain. I'm like, okay, no, we're going to change the way we make our plate, where you're doing about a third protein, you're doing about almost one half to another, like vegetables, a little bit of and then fat, and then a little bit of sweetness coming in through fruit. And so that's really helping people. And if you're if you don't want the fruit, you can substitute it out with a grain. That's totally fine. But I'm like, okay, you have your choices, and starchy vegetables, but starchy veggies are different than non-starchy veggies. So your potatoes and your corn, like that's not super healthy for us. That's just like, you might as well eat bread. So what we're talking about are the non-starchy veggies, so it's the kale, the spinach, the arugula, your tomatoes, all your peppers, all your cucumbers, your broccoli, your cabbage, your bok choy, all of these other carrots, zucchini, squashes, there's so much in this category. So that's how I would do it. And good fats, really important. I think fat has gotten, not anymore. Fat has become a friend now, but fat was really vilified for a long time. And so fat in itself is not bad. It's how we make it and what it is. So, trans fats and saturated fats are maybe not that great, are not good for you at all, but monounsaturated, which is good quality olive oil, avocado oil, those are like amazing. They're so healthy for us. So I personally, in my practice, don't recommend a lot of seed oils like canola and safflower and sunflower oils. Occasionally if you use them, like it's okay, but I really would prefer to use olive oil and avocado oil. Avocado oil is better for like high temperature cooking. Coconut oil, I'm mixed about that. I just sort of think in evolution, not everybody used coconut oil. I know it's quite the rage right now in functional medicine. And I just think in evolution, the vast majority of people that were light skinned never used coconut oil. So I'm just not there yet. A lot of my colleagues just use coconut oil, and then they follow the cholesterol and say, oh, look, it's high. I'm like, yeah, they never had it. As long as it doesn't affect the person, I'm okay with it. MCT oil is what I would prefer over coconut oil. But yeah, I usually check. I always tell my patients, if you want to do this, let's check. Let's see what happens. If your body's kind of responding negatively, then I don't care what everybody else is saying. We have to honor your body and what it's trying to tell us, because this is where you come from. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing.
Okay. So what if someone comes in with high cholesterol, especially that LDL? Would you say to them, cut back on your meat intake or get off meat completely for a short time? How would you look at it? Because some of my plant-based friends would say, no meat. How do you say it?
Yeah, I mean, so, there's that whole Dr. Ornish who recommends only vegan diets. But, the thing what we're trying to do in medicine is we want to make it sustainable. There's no point in changing something that you're only going to do for 2 to 4 months. My goal is, how can you do this for the next 5 years of your life? Because when it's sustainable, you are more likely to comply with it. And so if I see somebody with high cholesterol, very first thing I do is I actually put them on a full elimination diet. It's actually pretty hard, but I put them on a full elimination diet just to see if I take all the junk out, what happens. And it's not necessarily meat. So the full elimination diet, from a functional medicine standpoint, this is very different than everybody else. It's a long list. It's no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no beef, no pork, no eggs, no shrimp, no soy, no corn, no alcohol, no caffeine, right? So you take all those out. Usually, if you're not that sick, 4 weeks. And if you're more on the sicker side, 6 to 8 weeks. And then we put them in systematically one at a time, and then you wait for like 3 or 4 days to see, did I get a reaction? Like, oh, I had gluten, now I'm bloated. I'm like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be eating gluten. But oftentimes when I clean up this diet, the cholesterol will fall.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I go deeper into this by doing a particle size to kind of figure out. Particle size is looking at what kind of cholesterol particles are you making, big ones or small ones. So first it counts how many particles you have. The regular cholesterol profile that you get, the fasting lipid that all your primary care doctors do, it's a calculated number, fully calculated. We want to first count how many particles you have. If you have too many, that's bad, right? We want low numbers. And then we say, well, if you have too many, what kind of particles are you making? Are they big and fluffy, less dangerous, or small and dense, and a lot more can fit into that blood vessel, way more dangerous? So then we look and we say, oh, look at that. You're kind of big and fluffy. Yeah, you have risk, but you just got to clean up your life, and we got to help your body clear the cholesterol better. And if you have a lot of small, dense one, you're making that cholesterol. So now we got to go deeper, figure out what else is causing that bad cholesterol to form. Is it something genetic? Is it your gut microbiome? Because your gut microbiome helps you get rid of cholesterol and helps you make cholesterol. And if you don't have the right good bacteria, it won't happen. Wow. So it goes deeper. And is it because your insulin level is high? So now I got to bring down insulin. I mean, it's much more complicated than just simply just change your diet and you should be good. If you really want to understand it, the functional medicine perspective will take a deeper dive to say, okay, where are our problems? And then what are we going to do to help address these problems?
It's very interesting. I had a cardiologist tell me once that he said, you all think that the doctors want to push pills. He said, the patients want pills. He said that he can show a patient how to lower their cholesterol risk without medication, but just doing some different things, including stop eating sodium, that kind of thing. And he said, many of his patients say, give me the pill, doc, give me the pill. So.
I mean, yeah, I see the exact opposite of my patients. By the time people find a functional medicine doctor, these people are really interested in doing something different. And you're right. I mean, I have family members in my extended family that would much prefer to eat cake. They don't even take their cholesterol medicine every day. They're like, oh, I had cake, so I should take my Lipitor. I'm like, that's not how it works. But that's definitely, I mean, once again, it's that I need a quick fix. And that's what we've sold to them as a culture. And that's not how life is.
Right. But then, but I'm going to come back to you. I had a question in my mind, but I need to come back to that. But let's think about smart changes that people can make today. What are your top three? If a person says, Dr. Patel, I want to become healthier, what are the top three things that you would recommend for me, if there's such a thing as one size fits all in terms of your top three, and qualify it any way you want?
And we're looking at older people or younger people, kids?
Let's say middle-aged adults. Yeah.
So, and the reason I was asking, because it varies a little bit when you have kids involved. So if you're looking at middle-aged people, I think nutrition is incredible. It's one of the key things you're going to do, and it's going to come back over and over. So clean diet. All right. And so that means 80% of the time you're good. You can have your 20%. Like, my God, if the only time you cheat is over the holidays and your anniversary and your birthday, like, who cares? I mean, like, people are cheating 360 days out of the year, and they're good for 5 days. I'm like, no, it should be the other way around. Right. So try the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time you are making good decisions on a regular basis. And then I'm a big mindfulness person, meditation. Maybe it's because I'm older now. I just sort of feel there's so much stress in the world just from watching the news, things happening. There's stress everywhere. Everywhere you go, people feel stressed. And when you take all of that on, that stresses you out even more. So regular mindfulness or meditation practices or quiet time. So everyone's way, it's like, I have people who are so type A, they're like, oh my God, I don't even know how to sit down because I have to be doing something all the time. Like, they're not going to sit down ever. So for them, yoga, meditative walking, because they don't know how to slow down. And my job really is to counsel them on how to slow down. And this is a work in progress. This is a journey for them. This is a 5-year journey of learning to slow down. And then I have the exact opposite, where I have people who just like to sit too much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we need you to become more active. So, you have to meet the patient, but some form of quiet meditation is really important to me. And then movement.
Yeah.
We need movement every day. We evolved from ancestors that moved all the time. They weren't sitting around. And so it's really important for us. And I always tell people, it's not about exercise. I just need you to be moving. Housework is a wonderful way. Doing your garden is a wonderful way. We need to be active. And that's
Yeah, I mean, it's very wonderful to hear more and more physicians are talking about mindfulness and incorporating that in their practice. So that's great. And a lot of people though may not recognize how important relationships or relatedness in this mindfulness paradigm is to a person's health. And you've touched on that a few times during this conversation. Can you say more about why that's important? Relatedness or loving good relationships?
So, we've all met people that are toxic or worked with them. And when we're around this person who's toxic, we start to feel, we get more angry, we're more irritable. There's an institute called Heart Math, and they've done some extraordinary work on something called heart rate variability. So we have a pulse, and everyone measures it. And then in between these pulse beats, there's another rhythm your heart can have. And what we've learned is the more coherent, more like a sine wave these rhythms are, the better the person is, that they feel loved, they feel safe, they feel gratitude. And the more like crazy they are or low, they're very stressed out. And so the most common thing people have understood this is like when you go as a pregnant woman and you get your ultrasound, you get your fetal heart tone monitor done. And the OB will be like, oh, the baby's lines are all over the place. The heart rate variability looks great because it's very high. And when it's very low, they'll be like, oh no, we got to get the baby out. The baby is stressed out. So most people have had that experience. And that's exactly what heart rate variability is measuring. And one of the things I find is, heart rate variability over time does decreases as we age because we have more stress, we become less conditioned. But our goal is to have very high heart rate variability, which is telling us that you are coming from a loving, coherent, safe place. And relationships will do this to you. If you are in an abusive relationship, a manipulative relationship, a controlling relationship, your heart rate variability will be low. And so oftentimes when it's low, I'm inquiring like, hey, is this work? Is it stress? Is it somebody around you? I'm trying to uncover what it is for them. So then they can try to figure it out. And then as they get more and more in touch with like, wow, when I'm at home around this person, my heart rate variability is better. I'm like, okay, this person's helping me. But when I go to this particular person, my heart rate variability drops. I'm like, okay, so now we know that the issue is with this person. And how are we going to address this? And so oftentimes the therapist will work with them on how to, to have that discussion with this person, because that's beyond what I would do. But these loving relationships support us.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm going to be doing in my practice that's unique is I'm going to be working with the family, because the number one thing why people didn't fail, it didn't work out. I'm like, why didn't you, how come you weren't able to do all this? They're like, it was cost, it was time, it was lack of support, and my family was not interested. So I'm like, but if I could just treat the whole family, then the time issue is all wrapped into one. The cost becomes cheaper because everyone's doing it. So it doesn't take care of all of the reasons why, but it does help if we can have a whole team working with you.
That's
it's your closest people that you're more likely to be successful.
That's great. Hey, look, I want to talk with you about your practice. Why did you decide to open up a new medical practice?
So, I've been at Cleveland Clinic for 7 years. As with every position that people have, what I tell my younger people, I'm like, you've got like 3 categories of things that happen at jobs. I loved what I did. It was really, but I was ready for a change. But you have a place where, you like things, you're like, oh, if I leave, I'm definitely going to do that again. Then you have another category. I like this, but idea was good, but I would change the way it was implemented, the process, or whatever, something would change. And then there was like, oh, I just don't like this. This is really bothering me. And, as you work long enough someplace, after a while, that I wanted to do more. And the bucket of like, this is really beginning to bother me was getting to be greater than I wanted it to be. I love doing what I do. I'm very grateful for everything that the Cleveland Clinic has offered to me and has taught me. But I feel like I need to do something different and much more innovative. And I really want to work with families and children. That was so hard at the Cleveland Clinic. And so if I can focus on this group and really solidify what they do and do it more innovatively, I will be much more satisfied in what I'm doing.
That's fantastic. I think that's going to be a great medical practice for sure. Now, I think that you wrote a book, something that deals with the wellness wheel. Before we leave, can you tell us about that, this wellness wheel that you've come up with?
So this was when I was doing integrative medicine. So I would totally do it differently.
Oh, okay.
But it was written by my husband and I about sort of what we did what I was doing in my integrative medicine practice. Now I would change it more to a functional medicine practice. So I would definitely shift it. And, one of the things is even the functional medicine model is going to be shifted a little bit if you're dealing with families, because now you have groups of people. It can't be just a deep dive into the person. It's really about family dynamics and what's working. So I'm excited to try to do something different, more innovative, and you'll have to come back and ask me how that went.
Sounds good. Have you come up with a name for your practice?
Yes, it's going to be called Healing Family Functional Medicine.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to have to find you. I like that name. That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Patel, is there anything else, I know we've talked about a lot today, but is there anything else you care to share with us that I have not asked you about?
No, I guess preconception is another big area of focus for me. Just because I think our children are really afflicted with so many things that they've never been afflicted with. Our genetics have not changed, but our environment has shifted so much since the 1950s. Greater than 85,000 chemicals have been introduced with zero to very little information.
Wow.
And the people who are most profoundly affected are pregnant women and our young children. And I just sort of feel like this is why we're seeing this epidemic of all of these childhood problems. And that's goes back to very much cleaning up, cleaning up the environment and cleaning up our lifestyle so we can detoxify and live much cleaner. So that's sort of, clean life and clean nutrition is so important.
Sounds good. Sounds good. A holistic lifestyle, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah. Look, I really enjoyed my conversation with you today. You mentioned coming back, so maybe down the road, launch your practice. I'm going to bring you back and we can have a conversation about how it's going.
Perfect. I look forward to that.
Okay, but thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you for this opportunity.
You've been listening to or watching the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Dr. Seema Patel, a functional medicine doctor. Once again, Dr. Patel, thank you. I'm Stephen Middleton, your host. Until next time, good day.
Thank you. Bye.
You are not alone, just keep on going.